If you're an author or even thinking about writing a book, well, today's episode is a masterclass in making your words work for you. My guest today is Aurora Winter. She's an award-winning screenwriter, ghostwriter, and author of Turn Your Words into Wealth. She's been a client and she's a dear friend. And let me tell you, this conversation could save you years of frustration and put your book on the fast track to profitability. We're diving into how to use podcast interviews to turn your book into a magnet for authority, for clients, and for profits. You'll learn why your launch should start months before you hit publish, how podcasts can build anticipation, and even how to reverse engineer your book into a marketing funnel that works for you 24/7. Whether you're launching your first book or your fifth, Aurora shares a roadmap to making your message matter without burning out or sounding sleazy. If you've got a book inside you or already on Amazon, then grab a notepad. This is how thought leaders get their message heard and get paid. Aurora, thank you for being here. We've talked about this so many times one-on-one. I'm excited to share this with the world now about becoming an author, using your words, and then even using your words on podcast to promote your book. So, I guess the big thing is tell us a little bit about yourself, the background, what the expertise that you have here, because I don't want to leave anything out.
Well, so great to be on your podcast with you, Tom. I'm really looking forward to this. So, my background is as a film and television executive producer and award-winning screenwriter. I launched a film and television company. We raised $5 million, made 8 films. I've had a series of entrepreneurial ventures, and I've written 10 books. And I'm a big fan of podcasting. Podcasting is a really great way to get the message out. So my most recent nonfiction book is called Turn Words into Wealth. So my intention is if people listen to this podcast, it will give them some tips that they can use to turn their words into wealth right away.
And I love that because you're both a fiction author and a nonfiction author, but you realize that just because you wrote a book does not mean it turns into wealth. There's other things that need to be done there. And I think so many people spend all the work to get a book out there, and then nobody knows about it. And it just breaks my heart. It's almost, I think of having a child, right? You do all that hard work for 9 months, and then the work starts in that. So
and then the work starts for inches. Yeah. Seriously. That's why I wrote this book, Turn Words into Wealth. It's got 7 different ways to make 7 figures with your message. And like you're saying, so many people put so much love and thought into a book, but then they don't promote it. And they also don't let people know how else they can be of service. So your book can actually be the appetizer for a feast that you can prepare for your ideal client. So, you've got a book on Amazon, so people may find you by your book, or they may find you by listening to this podcast. But in addition to getting all the nuggets in your book or in your podcast, at Interview Valet, you are available to help people actually get the podcasts booked, right? So everybody who has a book, or especially a nonfiction book, would be well off to consider how else can you serve the reader? Are you a coach? Are you a consultant? Are you a speaker? Do you have done with you or done for you services like Interview Valet does? And to add a little bit of that into your book. And most people maybe just put that, in the author bio as a PS, but I think you should actually bake that in like yeast. It doesn't really work to break bread without the yeast in first. So think about how else you can be of service to your ideal reader, and have a couple of stories, mention now and again that you're a coach or a consultant, or you book people on podcasts, or in my case, I help people write books, whatever it is, put that in your book, and then you can make a bigger difference to people. And also you can monetize your book better.
I think that is so important. And we talk about that in podcasts, right? If you're a keynote speaker, bring it up in the talk. It doesn't have to be in the bio of Tom is also a keynote speaker. No, when you're telling a story, say, I was at a conference and we were talking about this and this came up. Work it into there. And I love your analogy of yeast, right? You don't put yeast and sprinkle it out on the top. No, it's got to be baked into it.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be that much yeast to make the difference, right?
Yes.
So just a little tweaking 5% of the content of your book. As you just said, Tom, when I was speaking at conference, this happened. And that just lightly lets people know, oh, that person is a speaker. Or when I helped this person write their book and now they've got, 3,000 reviews on Amazon and they've sold 100,000 books, even though they're self-published, people get, oh, maybe Aurora could help me write my book. And they also get, wow, self-publishing isn't what I thought it was. You can be very successful independently publishing in 2025. So think about that. And then, of course, you have to market the book. I'm a pro at helping people market the book without the podcast part. There are lots of things to do. I like a 6 months plan before the book comes out, to apply for awards, to get the book reviews lined up, to make sure that, all your friends and family and perhaps your affiliates are emailing out about the book. So, for example, Alex Hermosi just launched a book and he made $80 million in a weekend, $80 million. And he sold 3 million books in a weekend. So he won the Guinness Book of World Records. He outsold the book Spare, about Prince Harry.
Yep.
And he did that by a very organized launch and a whole bunch of techniques we could get into. I actually did a whole Strategic Basics YouTube episode about it. Anyway, so I like to help people make sure that they get the book launch sorted. People make a big mistake, in my opinion, when they just press publish. That's tragic. There's an opportunity to really set your book up for success and have it come out the gate as an award-winning book, come out the gate, with dozens of 5-star reviews. But then after your book is published, you need to talk to Tom and get on podcasts.
Well, I would even say before, right? That's one of the things I love when you've got authors that are starting beforehand and they start thinking about their plan, because it breaks my heart when we get authors that come and say, I'd love to get out and talk to about my book on podcasts. And you say, great. When's the launch date? And they say, it's next week. Well, media podcasts it's like doctor's offices and restaurants. The best ones have a waiting list. And if they don't, you don't want to be there. And so this idea of starting early, being a podcast guest, you can start to get the reps in, get those recorded. And then you can always ask the host, hey, can you hold this until the book launches in February? They can always do that, but they can't, you can't say, hey, the book launches on Tuesday. Can you do this next week? No.
Well, James Clear famously made Atomic Habits a bestseller by doing exactly that. He really organized his book launch, and I think it was for about a year. He went on podcasts in advance, and he asked them to hold the podcast until the date of the release, and his book became an instant New York Times bestseller. Or David Goggins is another example. He independently published his book, but he was told by a New York agent, if you self-publish, you'd be lucky if you sell 5,000 copies. But he self-published because he didn't want to lose control of his story. But then he went on a whole bunch of podcasts and he sold 1 million copies of the book and 600,000 copies of the audiobook within 1 year. If he had gone through a traditional publisher, it probably would have made the difference of costing him $20 million. Because when you're independently published, you keep the bulk of the money. You have to pay for printing and shipping still, but you're not, getting 10 cents on the dollar as you would if you're with a big publisher. So those two examples go to show how valuable podcasting can be. But yes, set it up in advance. Like anything with marketing, you got to set up your campaign well in advance.
And I've always been amazed. There's a lot of times traditional people will come to us through traditional publishers, and I'll say, do you have an audio book? And they'll say, no, that's coming later. And I'm like, well, why would you go on podcasts where people have already said they're an audio learner without an audio book? And, the truth is they don't make as much money on it, the traditional publishing houses. But I think David Goggins is an amazing example because his book was not like his audio book, right? There was always those little extra interviews in it where he'd give behind the scenes. And I thought that was genius because it was almost like a little 3-minute podcast interview at the end of every chapter between him and the narrator. And I think he sold everybody that bought a book, then bought a audio book or vice versa.
They didn't want to miss out on those little extra tidbits.
Yes.
Actually, David Goggins is a good example because he's not a wordsmith. He's got dyslexia. So he worked with a ghostwriter. Well, I think he actually credited the co-writer, and the co-writer was on the audio interviews with him. So there were always like little asides that weren't in the actual book. And Gary Vaynerchuk does that as well. He also freely admits that he works with ghostwriters. And usually when he records the audiobook, he says, well, I'm just going to go off script right now. I'm actually listening to one of his audiobooks. He's like, he'll make phone calls or he'll start something so that you can hear how he's talking to his team, right? Because he gets excited. So yeah, audiobooks are a great way to go.
Yeah. Let's talk about that ghostwriter thing. Cause I know I've talked with lots of entrepreneurs that feel like they've got to do the entire thing themselves that without help. And I'm like, is there anything else in your business that you do that way? Right. You always hire outside resources. You build a house. You tell everybody, this is the house I just built. Right. They don't think that you put the forms in for the concrete. They're looking at the final product. So unpack that a little bit.
Well, I serve as a ghostwriter for a lot of my clients because I work with a lot of people who are dyslexic or they're busy CEOs and executives. One of my clients, I just spoke to him yesterday, Dr. Mark Costas, and he said, I've been working on my book for 12 years without your help. And I'm so excited about this. I can see it. It's happening. We have great ideas. I sent him the manuscript and he's like blown away. So would you go to do heart surgery on yourself? No, you would go see a professional who's invested maybe a decade to learn how to do this. If you want a New York Times bestselling book or the caliber of a New York Times bestselling book, even if you don't get that particular accolade, you want somebody who spent 10,000 hours writing. I've certainly spent more than 10,000 hours writing. I've written 30 screenplays and 10 published books, not counting the ones that I've ghost written. So if you really care about the project and you're a business person, you would be a fool to do it on your own because it's going to be a rookie project. Because if it's the first book you've published, you're going to make all the rookie mistakes. And if it really matters to you, like every book I've written has generated at least 7 figures for me, not necessarily from selling books, but from bringing in new business. So when you understand that your book is a magnet for 7 figures, why would you monkey around and dither about doing it half-heartedly? Go all in or forget it.
I'm going to share my experience on this. I had no thoughts that I would have a New York Times bestseller, right? In 2016, when I was talking about podcast interview marketing, people were still saying, what's a podcast? But I had written the draft of it and I gave it to a friend, and he looked it over and, he gave me the feedback and he's like, this reads like a manual, right?
Well, you're an engineer.
this looks like it's written by an engineer. This is not a story that anyone would read. And so, he went and we worked together and I give him total credit for it and everything. And he turned it into something that was a story. It was something that was interesting and something that I was proud of. And I think that's the biggest thing is that I think so many people put that book out and if they're not proud of it, they're not going to promote it. And the thing is that comes through on interviews and everything. And if you're going to do all that work, do it well.
Well, exactly. And people remember stories. They repeat stories. It's stories that go viral. Whereas many books, especially if they're written by an engineer, they're more like a recipe or like a manual. And actually that triggers the analytical part of the reader's brain, which is not the buying part. If you're using a book as a lead magnet for your business, you want to engage the heart, not the mind. You want to sprinkle in the mind, but you want to be clear, what is the problem that you solve? What is the hell that people are in without your solution? And what is the heaven that you take your clients to after? So for example, in your case, it's so easy. The hell that your typical client is in is they're not reaching anybody. They can't get the word out. They've got a valuable business, a valuable book, a valuable product or service, and crickets, because nobody's heard of them. And then after they work with you at Interview Valet, which I've done before, it's a great service. After that, they're on podcasts. They're being interviewed by professional hosts or in the top 10% of podcasts. They have that sitting online, because podcasts are great because they sit online, almost forever, so that when somebody Googles their name, they pop up. They look like they're an authority. They look like they're an expert. And as you said, I think before we started recording, an AI indexes that, and you can get, business that way. So it's a super powerful thing to do. And that's just an example. Talk about the hell, talk about the heaven that you yourself turn your mess into your message, or that you take your clients through.
Yeah. And even on the podcast, right? Nobody wants the 10 steps to do this, right? Yeah. Because there's not an infographic that goes with it. You've got to tell the stories there. And you talked about how you can use a book on a podcast. I flip it around thinking of all the times that people told me that if you have a book, it opens so many doors. Years and years ago, Mike Stelzner, who runs the social media marketing world, big conference there, and he had all these criteria for who he would have on his stage. And one of them had to be, you're famous, right? If you can bring 1 million people.
If you're a Kardashian, you don't.
Exactly. If you're a Kardashian, you can speak. I've looked in the mirror. I'm not a Kardashian. And he's like, you have to have written a book. And he said, for me, that tells me that you're an expert. You have thought through it. You can communicate it. And I think the same thing goes with podcasters, right? If you've written a book, they can look at it and say, yes, this person's an expert. They've thought through it. They've got something to share. So I look at a book as opening so many doors.
In fact, I think it's probably, you can speak to this better. I think it's probably very difficult to be perceived as an authority without being an author. I mean, the root of the word authority is author. And most people don't understand that one of the biggest benefits of writing a book and working with somebody like myself who's pulling the gold out of your story, both personally and business-wise, is you get to review your whole life and your business, all the setbacks, all the supposed mistakes. And you can see, if that bad thing hadn't happened 10 years ago, this great thing wouldn't have happened 6 years later. And you shift your identity because you go through the muck of your history. You claim the gold and the diamonds and the silver and the platinum. And you're like, okay, well, just wash the mud away and let that go. And it shifts you. It shifts your identity and your confidence into an authority, because as you claim those bits of gold or silver or platinum, you learn how to articulate them. And so then you can go on podcasts, or you can speak at the front of, 500 people in the room, and you can speak confidently because you've invested the time. Even before publishing your book, you change into an authority by going through the effort of making a great book.
I remember hearing a fact that published authors are more respected than PhDs. And yeah. I'm like, I can believe that. And even with AI now, you look at it, November of 2024, ChatGPT started to show the sources that they pulled from. And just look at that. Their number one source is typically Wikipedia. All right. I don't have a Wikipedia page. So my number one source was pulling from Amazon with my book. Then it came to my website. Then it came to all that long form collaborative content on Spotify, on iTunes, all of that. But the search engines and AI also looks at published authors. That's the first source they go to there.
Exactly. Amazon is the number 3 search engine. And what I like about Amazon is people are searching on Amazon for solutions to problems with their credit card out, usually already installed. So unlike other places where they might be searching for amusement like TikTok or Instagram, on Amazon, they are more serious because they're ready to buy something, maybe buy a $20 book. So if you are a published author, you will naturally have your book on Amazon. So you're reaching the number 3 search engine, and the AI indexes Amazon. Definitely. They look for experts there, and they also check things like Goodreads. Well, if you have a book, you would definitely want to have it on Goodreads. The number 2 search engine though is YouTube. In fact, I did a Strategic Basics YouTube episode about the fact that YouTube has more downloads than Netflix, than Amazon Prime. Like, YouTube is the new television. So if you have a podcast, that is on YouTube, as I know yours is, Tom, again, you're reaching those people. And then the number 1 search engine, as we were talking about, is AI nowadays. I'm also being recommended by AI. And it's like ChatGPT wouldn't recommend me if I hadn't written the book Turn Words into Wealth, if I didn't have a company called Same Page Publishing. And now people are finding me that way. So I think that's really the trifecta for people to consider. Get on Amazon, the number 3 search engine with your book. Get on the number 2 search engine, which is YouTube. Many podcasts, most probably, are on YouTube. And I also think it's good to have video. You've got video on yours, because I think people need to see faces, because everything's going, is it Tom or is it AI? And then the LLMs will be your friend and will offer you as the solution when people are searching for the problem that you solve.
I never thought about that, but that's a great thought. When you go to Amazon, you're going there to purchase, right? I've never gone to Amazon because I was bored and going to doom scroll on
That's
Amazon, right? TikTok and some of the social media is to be entertained. But then often YouTube or podcasts is to be educated, to find solutions to those problems. So you need to make sure that you're in all of those.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things where today there's a lot of problems in the world, but there's no better time to be alive, right? You can create in the way that's easiest for you and then repurpose it into other areas where people can consume it there.
Absolutely. And I think now is the time to really double down on being human. And I've had so many people who heard me on a podcast, and then their next step was they went and bought my book, Turn Words into Wealth. And then their next step was to book a call with me, which people can do at bookcall.biz. And then their next step was to invest $5,000, $10,000, or $100,000. So it's a great and easy marketing funnel, because you write a book once and it stays on Amazon forever. You appear on a podcast once and it more or less stays on YouTube forever. So, you can have these things that you put a lot of effort into one time, like write the best book you possibly can. If you want help, I'm glad to help you. If you're a CEO or a leader up to something. If you want help getting on podcasts, you know how to contact Tom. But put the effort into these pieces of IP. I'd like to say iconic pieces of IP. Maybe they're authentic instead of iconic, but anyway, be yourself and talk about the hell to heaven transformation you provide for your clients, or the hell to heaven that you went through in your own life. And then once you've got those podcast appearances and your book that you've done a great job on, you have a marketing funnel that will work for you 24/7.
All right. I'm going to play the devil's advocate here.
Okay.
To the person that goes, well, can't I just use ChatGPT to write a book, or Claude to robo pitch me to podcasts? What would you say to that? You can, but here's the distinction. It's back to the 10,000 hour rule. So if you have already invested 10,000 hours in writing books, you can probably get Claude or ChatGPT to give you something fairly good. But if you are navigating, if you are the captain and you don't know how to get from New York to Los Angeles, you won't be able to guide it beyond your own level of expertise. So the LLMs are language prediction models. So what does that mean? It means they predict the average next words that will come out. So the result will be average. So if you're not already an extraordinary communicator, you just won't have the capacity to guide it. I could give a different example. So my son is a video game designer. He's got a degree in designing video games. He can use the LLMs that code
vibe code, I think it's called, to create great code. And he's making himself a new video game, which is coming out soon. It's called Circuit Ascent, because he already knows how to code. He's already a software engineer. But if he wasn't a software engineer, do you think he could get it to do it brilliantly? No, he could maybe get it to do it D-. Do you want D- for your intellectual property? Do you want D- reflecting your brand? I think not.
Yeah. And that's one of the things is just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? You can write a book, but if somebody reads that book, is that going to build or destroy your authority? You got to think about that. If they look at it and say, this doesn't sound like Tom, well, it destroys the authority. Joe Saul Sehi from Stacking Benjamins did a post recently, and he was nice enough to call us out in it as a great example. But he did a screen capture of all these different robo pitches that he got from AI. The subject lines were all the same. The context was basically all the same. The biggest difference was what they called him, right? Sometimes it was Dear Joe Saul Sehi Cumulus Media. Other times it was Dear Stacking, Dear Benjamins, all the rest of that. And now whoever was being pitched like that lost all credibility. What's the line from the Hippocratic Oath with doctors? First, do no harm. Maybe as leaders, we should think of the same thing.
Well, that's a really key point that you're making there, because a powerful brand goes both ways. So a brand is not your logo. A brand is not the color of your website. A brand is what other people say about you. So if you want to stand for an A+ brand, then you want every touch point to be A+, including the pitches for your podcasts, and especially including products that people expect to be impeccably polished, like a book. So you really want your book to be absolutely excellent, like to stand side by side with New York Times bestselling books and have people go, I can't tell that this was independently published, or I can't tell that Tom wrote this in the weekend. I feel like I got incredible value from this. On a podcast, you can be a little more authentic, a little more conversational. People know it's a conversation and they tune into podcasts because they want to see, who are you, when you're not all polished, or your ghostwriter may have written your whole book. So who knows? So the podcast, but still, like, I media train people so that once their book is published, they have their talking points. They're ready to say, the biggest myth I want to bust is this. The 3 points I really want people to take away is this. Here's a quote from a famous author that I really want to, have a little bow on the end of the podcast to end with. And communication is the most powerful asset in marketing. It's not about how you broadcast. It's not about whether you're on Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn. What matters most, what matters first, is what are you saying? What is your message? Who do you serve? What do you stand for? Are you somebody who stands for excellence and authenticity? Because that is magnetic, especially in the age of AI. So I would really invite people to devote, almost everybody knows the 80-20 rule. 20% of your activities will bring you 80% of your clients, of your happiness, of your income. And in that 20% is communicating. So many entrepreneurs that I know, before they work with me, they didn't spend any time working on collecting their own stories, collecting the stories of the clients whose lives they had completely transformed. Steve Jobs spent 3 weeks practicing before an Apple launch. He was busy, the CEO of Apple. Well, you can't be busier than Steve Jobs. And your communication, your words, your stories can make an incredible impact. And it's the difference between walking and ballroom dancing. To be a really great guest on podcasts or radio or TV, you want to be a ballroom dancer. You want to have practiced your sound bites. You want to have practiced flowing with the host. And just because you can walk doesn't mean you can ballroom dance. So just because you can talk doesn't mean you can be at the top of your game on media.
And I love that. And the idea, if you're a ballroom dancer, don't go up on a hip hop podcast, right?
Right.
There's the context there. And I've always believed that people in marketing should turn you up or turn you off, right? If I'm not their cup of tea, that's fine. It doesn't mean I'm bad or they're bad. It's just a bad fit. I can think of one of our clients. It was the most expensive book, Aurora, that I bought since a college textbook. His book was a $48 hardcover book. And when I asked him, self-published, I asked him, why did you do it this way? And it was like a coffee table book. It was beautiful. And he said, because my clients don't think twice about buying a $48 book. Right. He said, if I made this 99 cents on Kindle, they wouldn't value it. Right. And to this day, I've got that book, and there's a lot of other books I've given away or thrown out, but it's like a coffee table book. And like you said, he focuses on excellence, and he spent a whole lot of time thinking through the book launch, and everything that's consistent with his brand.
Yeah. It sounds like his brand stands for that level of quality and attention to detail.
Well, any final words that you would have someone that's thinking of writing a book, or has a book inside them, or maybe is working on it right now, of things they should think about?
Well, I just really want to encourage people who are listening to this. If they've listened this far, they probably have a book in them. 80% of people want to write a book, but most people die with that book still inside of them. And that would be a real tragedy. So I love books. I think books are the most amazing value proposition. You know, somebody usually puts a decade or two of their life experience into a book, and you can buy it for $20. And the other thing that's so cool about books, I think books are like seeds, and they germinate when the reader opens them and waters that with their attention. And so, like, I read the Narnia series when I was 9 years old, and that's really why I wrote this young adult fantasy series, Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse. C.S. Lewis changed my life, and he was already dead. My life has been changed by so many people who were already in the grave. And if you like books, you can probably list a couple that have really changed your life. So think about your ideal reader and how you might contribute and save them some of your mistakes, or just let them know, hey, you know, you're not alone. So I really encourage people, you know, to write a book. And if they'd like help with that, if they're a business owner, they can go to samepagepublishing.com and learn about my client success stories, and they can book a free business breakthrough call at bookcall.biz if they'd like more support.
I highly recommend that. I believe one of the best gifts you can ever give someone is introducing them to a new person or a new idea. And that's the one thing you can't do for yourself. And books are the ones that can do that. And as you said, if you want to be immortal, write a book, because you could impact someone long, long after you're gone. Aurora, exactly. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Tom.
Your book is the beginning, not the end. See, writing a book used to be the hard part, but in 2025, it's just the start of your authority journey. As Aurora Winter shared, your book is your best lead magnet, but only if you bake it into your business. The backstory and the strategic marketing plan and podcast interviews, well, those are your launch pad. You can record an interview once and show up forever on YouTube, on Spotify, and now even on the large language models that drive search. But this only works if your message is clear, if your positioning is strong, and if you're not just another author yelling into the void. So here's your action step. If you're writing a book, build podcast interviews into your launch plan. If your book is already out, well, start leveraging podcast interviews to drive those leads and consistent book sales. And if you need help turning readers into revenue, check out Aurora's work at samepagepublishing.com. Because in the end, your words won't create wealth unless you share them. Let podcasts amplify your message and your mission. Stay strong. The world needs to hear you now more than ever.